Welcome back to the channel. It's been a hot minute since I brought you a new video. In fact, this is only the second new video of 2022, so how lame is that, huh? But to be fair, I've had some health challenges that have kept me out of the garage and have given me quite the runaround, so still dealing with those, but I did have a chance to get some painting done, and well, some primering and some painting, and I'll be sharing that with you today. So I'm going to be spraying some SEM Hot Rod Black, which I purchased this paint quite a long time ago and for another project. Never got around to using it on that project and ended up selling that car, which was a 55 Chevy station wagon. I was going to do a Hot Rod Black body with a metal frake roof, and that project just went down the road. That was probably 12, 13 years ago now. Actually, maybe a little longer. It's been a while. But if you notice, I'm spraying in a new place. So put up this little pop-up and put up some tarps. And, painting outside has its challenges, but you got to do what you got to do to get things done. And right now, this was the best option that I had for getting these parts sprayed. So helping out a buddy, getting some, these are actually Toyota truck fenders. I'm going to be spraying for a friend. And, if you got to paint outside, you got to paint outside. It has a lot of challenges. I fought the wind the whole time that I was working on this, and I ran into some other problems. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Just the hazards of working outside, dirt blowing around, getting junk in your paint. But you'll notice as I go along, I wet everything down with a water hose really well. This area that I'm spraying at is just, the wind blows all the time, just 100% of the time. It's always blowing. So there's a lot of dry weeds and stuff around, which makes it even more challenging. It's just dry dirt, dry weeds. And so I got the tarps up. I just put up 2. This is the first day of shooting or spraying. I end up spraying, this is probably spread over about 4 different days that I'm going to cover in this video right now. And so I was excited to shoot this Hot Rod Black. Never used it before, heard good things about it. It's made by SEM, is the company who makes it, and I don't know if they're owned by somebody else, but SEM Hot Rod Black. And I believe, I just heard recently, they make a flat black as well that works really well, sprays really well. So I may try that further down the road. So I picked up a couple of these quart kits a long time ago. Like I said, that project was 12 plus years ago. So I've probably had these kits for 13 years, 14 years. Sometimes paint lasts and sometimes it doesn't. Really, as far as 2-part, I've sprayed a lot of lacquer through the years. Lacquer paint really never goes bad. It could dry out and you could add more, lacquer thinner to it and kind of bring it back. These paints that require a catalyst, the actual paint itself doesn't really go bad, but your catalyst or your hardener can go bad. And I didn't know for a long time how to check to see if it was good or bad. I'm like, how do you know these things? So I talked to somebody who manufactures paint, and they told me that as long as the hardener is clear and it's not cloudy, then it's still good. So you'll see me check that, or you saw me check that just in a little bit ago. I was looking at the color of it, and it was crystal clear. These have never been opened, so I was opening them for the first time. And so yeah, it looked good, and mixed it all up. You add, it's 4 to 1 to 1. So you got your paint is 4 parts, and your hardener is 1 part, and your reducer is 1 part. So that's how it mixes out. Yeah, and as you can see here, my coupler's gone, and I didn't even know it fell off. I'm not even sure how it fell off. It's not even something that I normally ever take off, and I'm guessing it was probably just loose from the very first time I got this Fuji Spray system, which has been a year or so ago now. And I must say I've been pretty impressed with this little Fuji Spray system. This is the first time using it to actually spray paint. I've sprayed a lot of primer with it, and I'm still getting used to it. You'll see here each time I spray, I test it out. I talked to people who use this system, and they say that you really control the amount of paint with the dial that's on the back. So you dial that in so you have less trigger pull. And that's a little bit different than what I'm used to using with a standard HVLP system that you use with an air compressor. These turbine systems are set up a little bit different, and then adjusting the pattern on the front. So yeah, this is just blowing off the fender. Like I said, it's really dirty out there. I was trying to do my best to keep the junk out of the paint, and it's a challenge. Anytime you're outside, it's a challenge. Thankfully I live in an environment where the humidity is really low all the time. We don't have a lot of bugs and stuff, so that really helps. So yeah, here we go, spraying for the first time. You can see the whole time I'm spraying, I'm making little adjustments, adjusting the pattern, adjusting the amount of paint that's coming out. Single stage is always a little challenging, I found. You always end up with a little bit of texture. This paint moves a lot of paint really quickly, so you actually kind of dial it way down. Actually, I installed a smaller needle and cap as well. This is a 1.0. I can't remember what size it came with originally, but I talked to some other people who spray cars and parts like I'm using it for, and they all recommended getting a smaller cap and needle. So I ordered that, and so pretty happy with it. I will say one of the major pluses, probably one of the only ones of spraying outside, is you just don't breathe the toxic chemicals as much as you would in an enclosed space. And this stuff will mess you up. Anything with a catalyst in it, man, you just don't want to get it in your lungs. I'm wearing a respirator. I always do when I'm spraying primers or paints. Anything with a catalyst in it. A long time ago you could get away with spraying lacquer because lacquer doesn't ever get hard, but man, you get this stuff in your lungs, and it'll actually harden up your lungs, and it can kill you. So, that's definitely one of the benefits of spraying outside. Is just the ventilation's real good, and yeah, this space is super tight. This little pop-up is only a 10 by 10, I think. I don't think it's 12 by 12. I think it's 10 by 10. And you can see the water on the tarp below me. I sprayed it down really well, but the table takes up some of the space, and a couple of these these little fender holders. It just makes it super tight. So thankfully I didn't actually run into any of the stuff I painted while I was painting it. That's probably the only thing I didn't have problems with, as you'll see as it goes along. Getting a little more used to it now. Spray patterns are getting better. I know I've heard people comment on some of my videos about, oh my gosh, did you learn to spray with spray cans? Or I have other issues. That's why I'm shooting in this location now as far as spraying parts. I live in the middle of town. I got to be really careful how I do things. And one of the ways around that and keeping the overspray down is just to spray little pieces at a time, which ends up looking more like spray painting, even though you're using a spray gun. So, And yes, I can spray with my left hand and my right hand. I'm right hand dominant, but I can do quite a few things with my left hand just as well as my right hand. So it comes in handy, you know, especially painting cars and trying to access places that sometimes it's way easier to change hands to spray things. So this is actually a few minutes later. I did a quick cut. I didn't have to, you know, didn't show you remixing in another batch of paint. But having not ever sprayed this paint before, I mixed up basically the smallest the cup would mix, which was like the lowest little line on the cup. So I just wanted to spray a little bit, kind of get a feel for it. So it actually flashed off between these. So this is basically the second heavy wet coat on these fenders now. And I'm starting with this fender here, which was, I think I left off on the other one. So anyway, if they flashed about like 10 minutes or so, you could touch them with your hand, your glove, and it was pretty good. It tacked off pretty good. So some paints are more forgiving than others, I've found, as far as your flash times. I know Tamco paints are extremely forgiving with your flash times. I've sprayed some House of Colors, and I seem to jump the gun every single time I've tried to spray that stuff. Well, I should say certain colors. I've had a lot of problems with solvent pop with some of the House of Colors stuff, especially the silvers. I've sprayed like a candy orange. It's a candy base orange. Eventually I'll get to that project and be able to talk about a little bit more. It's my DeSoto project, which I've never done a video on that car. So I've had that car for about 20 years, real close to 20 years now. It's still a project, but really, really great car. I can't wait to share that with you guys eventually. So the fenders came out really, really nicely. You can see them laid out here. This is, I don't know, maybe an hour, within an hour or 2 hours after finishing. And, you know, sometimes you make decisions and sometimes they turn out to be really bad decisions. And I thought about this on the way home, but I left them on this trailer to kind of dry in the sun. And unfortunately, a wind gust come up and grabbed one of the fenders and flipped it off. Well, it flipped it over, skidded down the car trailer and then into the dirt. And when I came over the next day to check on them, one was right where I left it, still perfect, no issues at all. The other one was nowhere to be found. And I went over and looked on the other side, and it was actually laying fresh paint side down in the dirt. So I picked it up, and it literally had dirt embedded in the fender into the paint. So that was extremely disheartening. So this is actually a week later now, and I took the fenders home. Well, I took both fenders home. The one that was messed up, I ended up blocking it completely back out with 180 grit and a hard block, and try to get as many scratches and imperfections out of the paint that there was. And there was a lot of imperfections, and it actually had 3 decent sized dents in it. So it's just crazy what the wind can do. So it flipped it over. I ended up using hammer and dolly, worked the dents all out of it, and was hoping that after blocking it really, really good, doing the hammer and dolly, that I'd be able to fill in any of the remaining imperfections with primer. And I wouldn't know that till I actually sprayed the primer and wet sanded it all out again with a hard block. So this is Tamco. This is a direct to metal. This is actually one of their rust inhibitor primers, but it was the only primer that I had that was black, and I wanted to spray black primer since I was going to be spraying the black paint, and I didn't want to mess with gray, and just this seemed like the wiser decision, even though it was, I had regular primer surfacer that was great. This black is made for like a direct metal rust inhibitor, which is more expensive, but it worked. This stuff is really, really thick too. The mix ratio is 4:1, so 4 parts primer to 1 part hardener, but I always mix it 4:1 with a reducer. I always thin it down. It sprays way nicer, smoother when you thin it down. I've sprayed it non-thinned, and not through with this gun, but a different gun, and it just seemed to, I don't know, it was interesting. I didn't really care for it, so I always thin it out a little bit. It always sprays really well. And so yeah, the little paint tape technique I just used on there, I'm going to try to start doing that more. I always forget about it, and that's quite a neat trick. You can get your tape on there and then just peel it off, and it keeps the paint out of your paint can, and you can seal it back up pretty nicely. So that's pretty cool. I haven't mentioned it in this video, but normally I strain all my paints before I put them in the spray cup. But these 3M disposable cups have the strainer built into the cap, which has been really nice. Just one less step and kind of less mess, less cleanup doing it that way. So yeah, you just pour it right in the cup and then snap the top on, and then it screens all the paint before it goes through the gun, and it's pretty convenient. I must say I like that feature. I've never had any of the disposable cups have that built into it. It's pretty cool. You might wonder why I test it every time I go to spray. Each time I spray something, I disassemble the gun and clean it really thoroughly. So it's kind of like starting over each time, and get a feel for it. And then each paint's a little bit different. It sprays a little bit different. This primer sprays different than the SEM single stage paint sprays. So you're going to have a little bit different, trigger pull and the amount of paint that comes out. So you just kind of got to adjust it as you go on the fly. You just get a feel for it. I'm still getting a feel for it. I'm by no means an expert using this system, but I'm working my way up. I've sprayed primer a lot. I've been very, very happy with the results spraying primer. I've sprayed this single stage SEM, and I've been pretty happy with the results for that. It actually flowed out. Part of that is just the actual paint itself flowing out and laying really nice and flat, but part of it's the gun too, because you can really lay a lot of texture in if you don't lay the paint down correctly. And so I've been pretty happy with that. So the next trick's going to be some two-stage, some base clear, which at this point I'm not sure how far down the road I'll be until I start spraying some base clear, but probably not too much further. I'm going to be spraying some parts for the gasser probably within the next couple of months. But I'm helping out a buddy with these Toyota fenders, and this little hiccup with the vendor flipping across the car trailer ended up costing me like 4 more hours into this fender. So it's a good hour of blocking, and then spraying the primer on it and just going through that whole setup is a good half an hour, and then you got to let it dry. And I came back the next day and I started wet sanding it. And wet sanding it, I actually thought I'd go a little faster than I did. I thought I could get it all done in an hour, but when you start going through it and you're fine tuning it, you're seeing every single flaw. So it ended up being like 2 straight hours of wet sanding to work out every little flaw, every scratch. And you might see me load up a couple of different spots here with more primer, because those are the spots on the fender that had the issues. In fact, I'm running out of paint right here. I'm just loading up a couple spots. There was a bad scratch that I thought I got out with blocking, but I didn't. It was still there. And but the good news is, after blocking the whole fender with 400 grit, wet sanding it, there were no flaws in it. It was like flat as glass, and it was as good as it was when I started with the fender before I messed it up. So I'm thankful I didn't have to put any filler or any putty or any of that sort of stuff in any of the flaws. Just the being able to bang it out, hammer and dolly it a little bit, and then lay in some heavy primer and block it out, wet sand it. It came out real nice. Like I said, this is about a week. This is a week to the day after I started these fenders. And the weather, if you can go back to the beginning and compare the weather, it was overcast this day, and there was like very, very little wind. It was like absolutely perfect for spraying. You didn't have super, lights and darks with the sun and super hard shadows. It was just the perfect day and the perfect amount of wind, and so it was good. It's always nice when things cooperate like that you have no control over, considering, everything works against you when you're trying to paint. I should say that neither SEM nor Tamco are sponsors of this here. I just, I like to talk about good products when I find them, and these are a couple of good products I found. So final paint going down on this fender, which I'm really happy about. You just don't know when you're spraying and when you're doing stuff. And like I said, the original spraying came out just mint, and then overnight it got destroyed. So my biggest worry after spraying this fender was I gotta put this thing in a safe space. So I was able to put it in an area inside, and it was able to cure and didn't get any bugs in it, or fall off the stand, or have the wind grab it, or have any mice jump on it, or whatever. I mean, you name it, it's happened to somebody spraying these parts. You just don't know until it's cured to the point where things can't mess it up. You always run that risk. So sometimes it's not your stuff that you mess up, it's somebody else's, and then you got to take the time to fix it right. So, but these ended up coming out really, really nice. In fact, he hasn't picked them up yet. They're still at my place, but they came out really, really nice. I'd be happy to run them on my own vehicle. What I like to do with these, and this is just the way I do it. It may not be the right way or the best way, but I'll come in and do a couple of more of like tack coats where the coverage is there, but it's not super heavy. And then once it's tacked off, come back with a couple of heavier coats and just get it really, really wet, so it'll flow out and smooth out, and you'll end up with a nicer finished piece when you're done. I've never sprayed this SEM before, so I wasn't sure about the reducer. This day was pretty warm. It was, probably a little bit over 80 degrees, not super hot, within the window of, spraying. I think it said on the can spray as close to 70 degrees as possible, which I'm sure if I did spray at 70, it would have flowed out even nicer than it did, because the cooler it is, the longer it takes to dry, which allows the paint to get flatter and flatter. But I had to do what I had to do, so it ended up laying out pretty nice. There really wasn't any noticeable texture at all. It was very, very mild, and the finish is nice because a lot of these flat paints, if you've never sprayed them, they'll dry almost with a little bit of a texture, and you can't even wipe them or clean them or anything, because the lint will get caught in the paint. But these actually dry, and the finish is very, very smooth, and this is it's called Hot Rod Black. It's not a super flat color. It's more of an eggshell, maybe a little bit, more than an eggshell as far as the finish. It's a very, very low gloss, but to me it's like the perfect finish. If you've seen some of my other videos, I had a little 27T, kind of a rat rod. No, it wasn't a 27T. It was a 27 Dodge sedan that was cut down into this little coupe. But it was was it a 25 or 27? 25 maybe? Gosh. Yeah, I think it was a 25. I've had too many cars. Can you tell? But that little black car, if you go watch that video, that car is painted with this same exact paint. This is the Hot Rod Black. So that car was actually painted by a friend of mine that I got the car from. And that's how I even found out about this paint. And I ended up buying it after he told me about it. And this, like I said, that was probably, real close to 15 years ago now. It's nice that I was able to use this material and it didn't go bad during the time I was storing it. So, it's always the risk you take. Well, thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate you guys watching and commenting, liking the videos, and hopefully I brought you a little bit of education, a little bit of entertainment, watching me do things the right way and the wrong way. I just do this as a hobby. It's fun. I've enjoyed it for a long time. I've been doing this stuff for 30 something years now. So like, subscribe, all that jazz, and take care. We'll catch you next time.